All right, I think we can begin now. If everyone can hear me, I'm going to start right now. And so, with that said, I'd like to introduce a guest here that would be speaking with us, Luigi, and appreciate that he's able to share some insights. So, my name is Dominic. I am a passionate inventor, a programmer, and I'm also founder of GyroPalm, a wearable technology startup people to control devices from anywhere in the world. Wearables and how their impact would be potentially positive in the ecosystem, especially during COVID-19 and afterwards. And we've noticed that there's been a high demand for technologies that have contactless capabilities for remote operation. And so right now we're going to go over a couple of key points about what is very so important about this and what are some things that we want to know in the long run that would allow wearables to continue to foster the innovation in our community. So with that said, wearables are great devices. Now, one of the things that we want to go through is how wearables can be used in a normal business environments, how they can be used even at home, especially in the work at home times. So that is one of those topics that we're going to be discussing. With that said, I want to find out, Luigi, are you with us?
Yes, Dominic, I'm right here.
Great, perfect. So um, with that said, I was originally going to have a slide about how we can use wearables to do multiple tasks, not including but not limited to controlling things. But I'll just show you one of the things of what I mean by that. So we have some here. For example, we have something that I've shown some of you noticed recently that we updated our one of our photos, and that being this one, the Air Mouse. Okay, so one of the things that if you notice in Gyropom is the capability to control Windows computers and other areas like that. So I want to bring up some important topics in these aspects. One of the main things that I want to emphasize in is the need for having a wearable to be versatile. So the discussion actually does begin with versatility. So having a wearable, uh, getting a wearable throughout uh, your daily routine is very important to the end user. And we as end users normally see this as apps. Whereas, for example, let's say you're running a Fitbit or an Apple Watch, you would be able to see apps um, throughout your day. But the problem lays in where the wearable that you're wearing actually may or may not function everything that you have or need. For example, if I want to, check Facebook, or if I wanted to, run an app where that takes inventory, if that's my, business, sometimes it might be very difficult. Or if I have to run a REST API or third party API service, that might sometimes pose as a challenge. So these are some challenges that we have, and wearables might not always be optimized in that realm. So when we're introducing something like as much as COVID, we might not actually have as use all the capabilities that wearables could have to their benefit. And so one of the things that we've always done at SF Wearables is we emphasize in ubiquitous computing. That is defined as the way of how we can compute and conduct computational activities anytime and anywhere. So normally something that would be done on a computer should be able to be performed on a wearable. So by having that capability, we actually open ourselves up to that type of freedom. So with that said, uh, you know, Luigi, would you mind sharing with us a little bit more about how what you feel about wearables and their impact in the community?
Yeah, absolutely, Dominic. So one of the things that what wearables like your product for GyroPom is, especially in these uncertain times, it's definitely going to be very helpful with as contactless technology now begins to emerge in a new era of in the IoT field. And I know personally for me on my end in my workforce, where we're starting to have a lot of protocols. It's like one of the things that we do in our workforce is practically just ensuring the safety of our coworkers, our employees. We want to make sure that we're trying to go as contactless as possible. We even have one of the physical components that we use to open doors. It's still a physical thing. It's still a burden, the fact that I still have to touch something in order to, let's say something as simple as open a door. So if I had, I'm absolutely certain that if I had Gyropom as a wearable, if I did just one single motion, I'll be able to practically just open the door without me even having to touch it. So with that being said, I'm just simply not touching something with wireless communication is the future.
That's very insightful.
I'm sorry, just practically anything like let's say starting up your car, closing your home. I'm sorry, Dominic, go ahead.
Yeah. So right now I'm showing an image of, for example, here's a diagram of what I feel that we can do in terms of wearables. So as you know, Gyropom provides a very versatile platform for anyone to be able to customize what you can do with wearables. So that's one of the main points I want to bring to this discussion, is that soon we might be later doing workshops that involve more and more performance wearables, and how we're going to show people how to customize wearables for their workforce or for their daily routines. And sometimes when you think about wearables nowadays, you think about a lot about how big businesses like like the Apple Watch, or even formerly popular businesses, like how the Pebble Watch made it through. These companies are actually designing wearables, and they're making a very popular thing, mainly because the wearables have certain apps that could be run on them, and those apps might be something that you're familiar with. Now, but when we bring it up in terms of development, if I wanted, let's say, for example, I wanted a wearable that would be able to run a service immediately the way that I want to, and that would bring value to my business. So maybe you might be listening as a startup business owner, or you might be working for a bigger company that would like to use wearables in the workforce. And sometimes that might be more difficult than easy to be said, because everyone might, first of all, to begin with, everyone might have a difference of opinion on what is the ideal wearable. So that's the main goal of our meeting here, is to speak about what is an ideal wearable here, and what is something that can be versatile enough to be used in a professional setting, and what can be versatile to be used on a daily basis. Now, I'm showing this diagram here to have a better understanding on what would be a good idea, and why I do believe that an ideal wearable would be something like a bracelet or a smartwatch. So if you look at this diagram here, we have a smart ring. We have also an option for wearables like smart glasses. It could be also, a bracelet. It could be a smartwatch. It could be a belt, something on a belt like a Bluetooth tracker, or something that runs on your shoes, or it could be something that like pants, or it could be like something like a coat. But normally, when we're thinking about smart devices, I would say that people think less about wearables that could be worn as clothing. Like, for example, if you have a shirt that is a smart shirt, or if you have a belt or pants, that might be less convenient, because sometimes you don't always put all those. And sometimes, obviously, you'll switch and you'll want to have different variations. But a wearable that is normally very, very flexible would be something like a ring, or it could be a watch, it could be a bracelet. Those are some things that are very common. Now, we have another startup that used to do smart shoes, and gaining insights from that is very interesting. Is that you only have certain ways to input data, so the resolution of data really changes. So I want to bring up that emphasis, is that when you have a wearable, the functionality of that wearable is very dependent on how it's worn. So if I have something that's worn on my wrist, the data that I'm going to get from it or the options for input that I'm going to get from it are very different than if a wearable is worn on your shoes. For example, I could be doing gestures. Like for GyroPom, we have been doing research on how gestures are being done, and gestures are very commonly performed on your hands. And if I were to say, well, we got a smart wearable, it ties up to your ankle or it's inside your shoes, that is going to be a little bit hard or even awkward. So discussing in this realm, it would almost be not so much as socially acceptable if I had to kick somebody to actually run an API or something like that, So you want to have a very subtle interaction. If you want to have a very subtle interaction with user interfaces, you have to have something that is very subtle on a day-to-day basis. It needs to be there when you need it, but not be there when you don't. So this should be another key point that we'll be writing. And if you're actually keeping track of what we've been going through right now, we've been going through that smart wearables like braces, smartwatches, anything that goes near your upper body would be more beneficial. Sometimes it might be good to consider something that goes on your belt, but that's a little bit out of the realm especially when it comes to what's needed. Another thing that we want to look at is smart glasses. I believe that Google did a really bold move by introducing the Google Glass, although it did not work out that well for many reasons, obviously. But perhaps one of the main things that some companies are trying to bring back the smart glasses technique, and I believe some of these companies like North Focals, for example, when they're bringing back these techniques, what they're not bringing back is not just the fact that you're changing the way that the glasses work. For example, bringing in augmented reality, bringing in different ways to show things, because Google Glass, I believe the first version did not have augmented reality. All it did was it basically recorded video, showed notifications, and did it in a way that is on a transparent screen. So you can't really call that augmented reality. It's more like just putting an overlay on things. Augmented reality is a technology that makes use of the existing environment with the objects the way they are. It might be doing object tracking. It might be doing different things. And that's why we're talking about here about the smart wearables. So what makes a wearable smart? In our terms, in GyroPalm's terms, a smart wearable is something that is aware of the environment. So if you're wearing something every day, that object, in order for it to be smart enough to interact with you, should first understand your environment. So that's the best way for that wearable to be worthy of wearing in the first place, right? You're dedicating real estate on your wrist. And if you're doing that, dedicating real estate on your wrist for a wearable, I believe you should make the best use of that space, and you should make the best use of that time. So a lot of people have been wearing watches for many years. That is probably for a stylish appearance. And although that's really great, sometimes a lot of people would opt in for a more powerful watch if possible. They want to opt in for a watch that is ready to perform. And that might mean they want a diver's watch. It might mean they want a watch that's more durable. It might mean they want a watch that can do more than just tell time. So for example, giving notifications, tracking your steps. And in GyroPalm's case, controlling things with your gestures. So we give that customization and flexibility when we're doing something that is involving wearables. And we want to give anyone, even non-coders, the freedom of customization. So onwards to GyroPalm, I'd like to show you one thing is the power of how GyroPalm can enhance your daily routines. We have GyroPalm, the universal interface for a wrist. It is indeed something that we have shared with a lot of people. We've showcased GyroPalm at CES 2020 before all this happened. But right now we're thinking about how to pivot GyroPalm from simply a consumer standpoint to something that's more beneficial for the workplace. How can we use this power of hands-free technology to actually bring it into the workplace, bring it into even in a case where everyone has to work at home or where they have to reduce contact as they live their normal lives again. And so this is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to now split GyroPalm into 3 areas. And I'd like to discuss how we're aiming to do that. So one of the main things that we want to do is we want to give user empowerment. So user empowerment is very important for all this. And what that means is we want the user to feel powerful as they use the device. You don't want a device that tells you what to do, or a device where you have to follow the instructions, open apps, pinch small touchscreens. We want it to be able to give you the flexibility you need wherever you are. So user empowerment through the environment, right? The other thing that we want to give is we want to give flexibility and low learning curve. So a lot of people, elderly included, and non-technical and non-technically inclined users, they would like to be able to give an application to others. For example, I'll put a case study here. For example, John from let's say there's a John from a grocery store needs to train staff and employees on how to bag items, and sometimes he might have to hire a staff member just to do that, how to train users on how to use something or how to do something. If you have a wearable that reminds users what they need to do or tracks their movements accordingly and helps guide them along the way, that can be a huge difference. That can be a huge momentous difference. Or if you're able to communicate, within 6 feet of people, I believe that would be a very impactful way to reduce contact and allow the reduce the spread of the COVID virus, or we would be able to bring higher convenience without actually getting close to anyone. Now, the other thing that I want to bring up is you're not just limited to home automation. Although we highly emphasize Gyropom for home automation, you're also able to control presentations, control computers, and you're able to do a lot more with just one hand. And that's one of the main things that we want to emphasize in is the accelerated enhancement of daily routines. So what are daily routines? There are actually devices out there called ADLs, and those devices are basically assistive devices of daily living. Sometimes these are aimed at people who are disabled. For example, there are devices that help disabled people do more and achieve more and accomplish more. But I believe that both the disabled and normal people can be able to embark on complex tasks in a much simpler fashion by using a powerful wearable like this. So one of the things is navigation. Sometimes touchscreens might not be the ideal thing to do. So we know Tesla has touchscreens inside their cars. We also know that there's a lot of different ways that people can interact with devices. And so we've talked to certain teams before, we talked to certain people before, and after listening to feedback, what we've been able to gain is that having a wearable that is customizable and able to interact with you in different environments might sometimes be the game changer. So for example, instead of using a camera or computer vision to detect when you're doing a gesture, we're using Gyropom. We're using Gyropom because it doesn't require setting up cameras in different areas. Also, the fact that we can customize it with our custom portal, and that allows us to be able to train gestures dynamically, and that gives accelerated flexibility. So one of the things that we've seen across the industry is that there's multi-protocol standards. So we adapted our wearable to Bluetooth, Smart IR, RF, and different areas like that with long-range capabilities. So that's another thing to note in wearables is that a lot of wearables out there actually don't have the capability just yet to give the flexibility and compatibility that the industry is demanding for. So the industry might be demanding for a lot of connectivity, a lot of support for different protocols. And now we have Bluetooth for almost every single wearable that you can buy nowadays. We have Bluetooth, but it still doesn't have certain functionalities that are needed to communicate with machines. So that's one of the very key highlights that we'll go over later in other series of the wearable seminars. So customization is a very important key. We want to go through customization as it seems fit. This might mean, we're using Gyropalm as a wristband, as a smartwatch, so different form factors, introducing that into the story. Some people might want a lighter device. They might want to have something that is easier to wear. Doesn't need to be full form factor of a smartwatch. And so we've taken in considerations into these realms. So those are also some topics that we want to look at. We've done devices that have been able to control various electronics without actually having a huge footprint. So this might include doing customized applications for that. So I want to understand right now, before we actually pull forward, does anyone have any questions that they have? We're going to do like a 2-minute or 5-minute Q&A. Since this is a fireside chat, please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I'll spend a few minutes answering them. And by the way, feel free to unmute yourselves if need be.
I was keen on understanding how the supply chain aspects would get affected by the COVID-19.
So that's a very good question. We have even for us as a startup, for Gyropom as a startup, we've seen a lot of different areas that have been affected. So there's in wearables, there's a lot of sources that have been supplied from such as overseas sources like China, sources like Taiwan, and different areas across the world, Japan, etc. And it would be taking a lot of time to name all the sources that are affected. But one of the things that have been a struggle for wearables, or especially wearable startups right now, is the fact that sourcing is a difficult thing right now. But we believe that perhaps in the near future there might be more opportunities that open up. For example, more countries might be taking advantage of this opportunity to start their own sourcing, and so perhaps China, in addition to a lot of other countries, will start balancing out certain duties. Of course, China will always be a great source of suppliers and different areas like that. But the bright side that we're also seeing is there's a lot of other places that are also starting to manufacture their own parts for wearables. And by parts we mean normally parts that are used inside wearables, like lithium polymer batteries, external enclosures, OLED displays, buttons, watch straps, different watch accessories, etc., and PCBs. So PCB manufacturing, as everyone knows it, has been always an art for dozens or several decades actually, but only till then right now has it been ever high of a convenience, because as you noticed, it's very obvious that PCBs are now more scalable. You can make 2-layer, 3-layer, 4-layer, up to 6-layer and more of PCBs, and that is very popular of an option for a lot of, even for makers to start with. We've seen different areas and that have featured that. For example, if you just look up Hackaday smartwatch, you are able to see how many people have tried their best to do a wearable, even something as something like this. They are trying their best to create wearables to meet their own needs, and this is something that we are excited to see people do. But the sourcing of wearables in general nowadays have been a little bit tougher. So we're seeing a little bit more of an idleness in makers, and this is why we're having this seminar, because we are for the makers. We're engineers, for makers, and for all companies alike. So this is after all SF Wearables. So our goal here is we've known communities such as the Pebble community out there. We've known a lot of different communities that have been able to make it with good wearables like this. Like, for example, wearables that have high levels of customization. And running a smartwatch company or running a smart wearables company is definitely not an easy task. It takes a lot of skills and effort to actually design and manufacture a wearable in the first place, to be able to make those dimensions work out properly. For example, getting wearables to be able to communicate with each other, and getting wearables to have all these functionalities like wireless connectivity, smartphone notifications, doing so much more is it's definitely not an easy task. So our goal here is, again, to look at different ways that we can look at to achieve wearables that actually do make an impact without actually seeing all the difficulties of it, but addressing the highlighted challenges. So to sum it all up, we're looking at other suppliers, but we do look forward to having China as one of the main suppliers. And obviously, our wearables from Gyropom are majorly made in the United States. So, for example, we use for tooling, we use local tooling, injection molding and tooling from a local U.S. company. We buy a lot of our parts and source them from the United States as well. So I think a lot of different things are going to become very insightful soon. We've dealt with some tooling companies, especially those that are listed in the design to part. And if you haven't checked that out, we highly recommend you check that out. They are a great resource if you would like to do design for any hardware project. Design to part, this is how you spell it. And they're a very great trade show that feature a lot of different wearable, I mean, not just wearable technologies, but a lot of manufacturing technologies. They'll help you. There's going to be a lot of manufacturers that help you look at the manufacturing and look at supplying in a different way. They'll actually have agents that help you manage your supply chain. And so Vignesh, I hope this answers your question. Is we have seen a lot of different areas where we can source various things from such trade shows, and actually quite maintain a quite good business relationship with some of the key suppliers here. And so according to this, they actually have some good events here. And now I think they might even have virtual events because of the COVID outbreak. But I hope that helps as one of the resources. If anyone does want to design their own wearable, or anyone does want to explore that, please feel free to take a look at that. But for those who are not intending to design a wearable necessarily, if you just want to learn about how wearables work, or if you just want to learn about how you can customize wearables, I highly recommend you guys go on gyropom.com app.gyropom.com. You'd be able to learn more about how Gyropom works and everything like that. So this would be a very good way to do it. So last but not least, I want to bring up, before I again resume the Q&A session, there's also the need for versatile wireless networks. So that means with the Gyropom wearable, and in some cases the wireless base that we include, I think users would be able to gain more insights about not only what application they're trying to control, but how they're trying to be able to control it. So only recently we redesigned how the base works, and how we actually Gyropom's base works is very interesting. For those who don't know what a Gyropom base is, I'm going to give a little context. A Gyropom base is an instrument. It's a small hardware device that allows you to control anything with the Gyropom wearable. And you might be asking, why do you need a Gyropom base? Well, the beauty of the Gyropom base is that it's compatible with the wearable itself, and that allows you to attach it to a drone and fly it. That allows you to attach it to fireworks, as you've seen here before, and also attach it to many more different devices. So that is one of the different areas that you would be able to control. You can attach the base to machines, manufacturing tools, different things in the industry, and that allows you to accomplish much more. So as I was saying, with a base, we've only recently given a new feature that allows you to add a virtual Gyropom base, and that's very powerful. So for those who don't want to necessarily buy Gyropom base, they have something like, I want to control REST APIs, or I want to control webhooks. I want to be able to control third-party services. Like, for example, Zoom. Let's say Zoom has a third-party API. So you could say Zoom third-party API, and you would be able to see that Zoom has APIs that can do more. So an API is basically an extension that allows you to use an existing service with new implementation. So for example, if Gyropom wants to control Zoom, then we would use the Zoom API. And users who want to use Gyropom to control Zoom, if we were to have the integration like that, you would be able to use gestures to actually interact with Zoom. And that opens a whole new realm of different user interaction. We're looking forward to speaking with more clients or more potential leads about how we can be able to gain this type of control with more third-party services. Right now, we've dealt with the DJI drones. We've introduced compatibility with DJI drones. We've introduced compatibility with the home automation area, so you can control home automation switches and much more. But we're looking forward to doing more integrations to make this wearable accomplish something that other wearables don't normally do. For example, you can't do this with a Fitbit or a Garmin watch, and even in some cases, I don't think you can do certain things like that with an Apple Watch, because remember, an Apple Watch is limited by the hardware that's inside and the apps that are running on the App Store. So if somebody doesn't make that functionality, it simply won't be there. And the goals that Gyropom was trying to provide is not just a wearable, but the whole stack itself. We want to give you the full package, the freedom to implement whatever you want, anything that you want, and be able to share that with people that matter in your business or outside. And so that's one of the main things that would be very helpful. So going over that same realm, having versatile wireless networks is very important. Okay, I want to spend a few minutes for anyone who has any comments or questions again.
So due to COVID, do you see any change in our pivot in terms of hardware development or hardware startups in general?
That's a good question. So finding this is actually a very challenging. This is a very big challenge for a lot of different startups actually. So due to COVID, there might be some challenges for a lot of startups in the realm of production or in the realm of scaling up to different
So
use
my
cases.
question, let me be more specific. Is it forcing the startups to be more software driven than as a primary focus for business?
Actually, yes, they would be. Actually, there would be a lot of startups that, and I've known quite a few startups, wearable startups that have been out there for years. And I think now is probably a time where startups are, especially wearable startups, are reevaluating what market segments they want to be playing in. This is what that means is they might be reevaluating their values that they might bring to clients and customers. And sometimes in order for them to bring that same value to customers, they might have to reevaluate determining where they want to develop. And that might sometimes be even a more software oriented area. They might start focusing on different software play. And for those who have been distributing enough of wearables. So for example, there's a lot of people who have wearables right now. And if a software company already is using an existing wearable out the market, or if a startup company actually has sold a lot of wearables out there, they have a benefit of doubt. They could roll out software updates. They could roll out new functionality. They could roll out new packages to existing users that allow them to benefit from having all these areas. So that's a very good insight that I would like to give is for any software companies out there, for any good companies that actually have been running back then and been doing well with hardware. Nowadays, I think it's more important than ever to actually figure out what we can do with the software to improve how wearables work, because wearables are a piece of hardware that can handle ubiquitous computing. So any software that we can write to redefine how wearables work, that is going to be a very key highlight here that a lot of people would want to be aware of. So this might mean if a wearable was previously used to only track steps, it might mean flashing a new firmware on it to allow it to do more, like to tell the weather, to change notifications, to be able to alert loved ones or things like that. And that's a very important insight, because people are going to buy less hardware nowadays, at least for these couple months, because of the coronavirus. And people are going out to shop less. People are going to do a lot less work. But let's say, for example, you have a wearable. If you're wearing a watch, or if you're having a wearable on you that allows you to place orders, or that allows you to communicate with the staff, or do things that you normally do at home without walking around, I think that's a huge convenience. That's a huge value added service that people would be willing to pay for. People would be willing to adopt because of the convenience that it brings. So Gyropalm was one of those startups that really appreciates bringing value to people in terms of communication, in terms of turning everyday ordinary tasks to something that's extraordinarily accomplished, because we're using gesture controlled based techniques that no one else has done before. And we think that a lot of companies can also, even if they don't have gesture based technologies, they can still revise the hardware in a way that does not involve redesigning, but rather minor tweaks of the firmware or software. And for those who are using an Android Wear smartwatch, perhaps there can be a little bit of software that's involved that would allow them to have quick motions or quick shortcuts to allow to access things that might be frequently needed. So, for example, with the advent of Zoom, everyone is liking to use Zoom right now. There's an incline of people using different web-based technologies. This is where the insights are at. So that is more important than ever to have availability for. So for example, having different realistic choices for people to embark on using wearables in their everyday routines, that is something that would be highly of essence especially in the software area. So so that's where the software developer should go should they choose to embark with hardware. They should choose to embark with hardware that is already scaled or is currently scaling. And so yeah, this is not exactly the most ideal time to design new hardware, but it's actually nonetheless a really good time to still use hardware. I hope that answers your question.
Dominic, question.
Mm-hmm.
So how easy would it be for a maker to customize GyroPalm?
Good question. So we have a lot of functionality in GyroPalm, and one of the main things that our wearable does that a lot of other wearables may not necessarily have is the all-in-one package, or almost like a luxury of having a built-in IDE. So we have something called the GyroPalm IDE, and it's a very powerful tool that allows anyone, including regular users, to be able to embark on creating new wearable projects. And the wearable IDE is something that it's a very powerful tool that allows anyone to be able to just hop along and design whatever they like. So I'm going to show you real quick. As you can see here, this is the GyroPalm IDE. As you see, one second. This is the GyroPalm IDE. And this is a very simple IDE that allows anyone to be able to control things. And so if you ever dealt with something, and we've designed it in a very simple way that really resembles almost like the what you would know the Arduino environment is. So if you're familiar with Arduino, you might really like something like this, because this allows you to program the wearable and add your own scripts to the wearable, just like any Arduino IDE, but with a really finished and powerful packing interface that we have behind the scenes. So this is one of the very popular things. So I will show you, for example, you can start different commands, like you can start saying, you know, right, you can actually start very powerful commands on the GyroPalm IDE, and you'll be able to flash your code on the watch. And it is actually a very useful tool. And this is what we also use to customize the gesture recognition. So if you would like to customize what you would be able to do with the GyroPalm IDE, this is a very powerful tool to be able to do that. If users want to add new devices, also they're able to interact with our app. So there's an app there's a dashboard that we provide with GyroPalm. I'm sorry about that. My time and my clock is not set right. So there is a dashboard for GyroPalm that allows you to be able to interact with various functions. And that means you can be able to customize your gestures by dragging and dropping. For example, I could just do something like this, and I would be able to drag and drop whatever that's needed. You would be able to customize all the various gestures that involve, that involve syncing it up. And this is a very different technique that normal people do. People generally will train gestures and do that multiple times. But in our case, you don't actually have to do that. The gestures can be stored on the cloud or on the wearable. It's a very powerful system where customization isn't a huge problem. And if anyone wants to run REST API requests, they could do so by logging into the dashboard, running some drag and drop requests. And for example, if they're programmatically inclined, they can also write this into the system. So if they ever wanted to do this, we have tutorials online, and we have API requests that they can be running. For example, we have the GyroPalm Central API, and that's a very powerful endpoint where you can actually customize exactly what you want to do with a wearable. For example, if you want to do different gestures, for example, I have a triangle gesture. If I want to bind that gesture to something like turning on the lights or flipping a slide, I can do that easily, or I could do that through the IDE. So those are some things that you can do, and you won't be able to find with other wearables out there. So is there any other questions?
So in the future, do you see that there might be wearables that would be inclined towards COVID-19? Like temperature measurement, or something like maybe there might be a sensor that could be targeted towards identifying the virus or something like that? Is that a good area to focus for future startups?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So wearables, actually, there's a lot of great things about wearables, and one of the things that you would be able to understand is that having a wearable be used to track the movement of the virus might give and prove significant data. Now, the only problem here is that it's difficult for a wearable or any sensor on a wearable to track COVID-19 viruses. Okay, and that's because mainly the main problem here is you cannot actually detect just yet with a wearable, or there's no existing sensor out there just yet that is on the market on detecting the COVID-19 virus on a wearable. But don't get me wrong, though, there are wearables out there that might be able to detect temperature. So we actually designed, our startup designed a wearable that is able to detect temperatures, so body temperatures. And that would be very fantastic to introduce into COVID, because especially during the pandemic, because now what I mean by that is, if let's say your business has 20 employees, it's very difficult to track 20 employees simultaneously to check their temperature. Everyone would have to use an ear thermometer, or everyone would have to scan their face in front of an infrared camera, and that's not a very effective technique to scan for viruses too, because the infrared camera is only detecting your skin temperature from afar, and it's very hard to find a perfect spot on the skin to actually get the temperature. If you want to check the temperature on the body temperature, it is best to have a temperature probe touching the skin directly. So if you wanted to check for potential signs of infection or viruses, and it does say, according to the WHO, over 80% of people who do have contracted the coronavirus have a fever, and that is a result of something called fibricity. So if you look up fibricity, fibricity is the rise of temperature in the body, frequently a symptom of infection. So if we have a wearable that detects body temperature, and we're actually in the process of having one of these wearables, so I want to show you this. This is a wearable that actually we have, and this actually detects body temperature. So as you can see, there's a medical grade stainless steel surface, and if I were to place this on my hand right here, my wrist, right, then it would be able to detect the temperature of my wrist. If I were to place it underneath my wrist, then I could get temperatures that are good enough that would be plus or minus 5 degrees from the core body temperature. Now, when I say plus or minus, I don't mean that as a tolerance. I mean the offset of that. So we have written algorithms and looked at algorithms that would be able to calculate the core body temperature, and those are probably the same algorithms that are used by those who design ear thermometers. So it would be having the same accuracy or very similar accuracy of an ear thermometer, but you would be able to wear that, have that wearable on your wrist the whole day, and that would give you a long-term range of your temperature. Now, using software, you could probably track the likelihood that anyone has the virus. Of course, it's not guaranteed, but it would definitely make a huge impact to the society, because if you have a wearable like that, it would be very tremendously effective at having a firsthand experience on knowing who is a spreader of the virus, who is having a virus first, and who is spreading that. Because if you are tracking more than one person, so if I have a dozen people having that wearable, and one person has a slightly higher temperature than the rest of the people, and let's say they've been having a meeting or hanging out together, so what happens is, over time, another person will get the virus, and you would be able to track the spread of the virus actually quicker than a hospital can diagnose, quicker than a regular body thermometer can diagnose, because this is constantly being worn. Now, one of the main challenges with this is not about the technology, but when you're having everyone wearing this, the challenge is the acceptance. So is everyone in your company going to accept having a wearable that tracks temperature? Is everyone going to be comfortable with that? That might be another issue that might pose difficult, but I can guarantee that if everyone is okay with that, for the safety of everyone, if everyone is okay with having a temperature wearable and knowing that, having a notification on when that temperature is being logged, they can still maintain anonymity, but at the very least benefit the company from being affected. So if a company does administer wearables to users, to their employees, it would be the best for everyone, right? It would be the best that everyone is staying safe and to protect all the employees. So this would be a very good technology that we would be able to offer to people who are interested, to anyone who's interested in it. And having a wearable detect temperature is a very powerful technology. We're using the Texas Instrument sensors that give a high resolution accuracy of plus and minus, I believe, half a degree. So it's very accurate. And what we can do is we can take this technology to the next level by giving it to larger organizations. So this is, again, it's not the typical Gyropom wearable, but it is a dedicated wearable that we have that tracks temperature. And we do believe there might be future wearables coming out here that have similar functionality that track the body temperature. Of course, because there's a metal plate on the bottom, you can only track the temperature. So the Apple Watch that has a PPG sensor on the bottom, it tracks heart rate. It does not track temperature. It will not have the capability to track temperature at least as we know it right now, because the bottom of the wearable, their wearable, is dedicated to tracking the heart rate. So they have a crystal clear optical sensor. You cannot replace it with, a high resolution thermistor sensor, because if you do that, you'll be blocking the lens for the heart rate sensor. So we know for a fact that these wearables out there, at the time of speaking, they don't track body temperature. If they do, it would be internalized and they would have to use another method of it, such as infrared tracking, which, by the way, they don't have just yet. So yeah, just bringing this up into the conversation, we do look forward to more wearables having this. It's always a good thing to have more insights on your body. And that's just yet another thing about user empowerment, right? The first point that we brought up. User empowerment is highly important when you're looking at aspects like tracking the environment and yourself as a whole. And so having that understanding, that self-actualization on what's important, it can be very beneficial, not to you, but to the rest of the society, to people around you, and to empower in general, the workflow of your daily routine. So it might mean that if you know you're sick, you're going to take better care of yourself early. It might mean that if you know that you have the disease, you might do something differently. You might stop going outside, or you might and so that's what we look forward to. We do look forward to the possibilities of having more wearables like this.
Dominic?
Yes.
It's Tim from Paris. I'm not from San Francisco.
Okay.
So I'm gonna have to sign off soon, but I just had a general question. This has been a very interesting conversation, especially this issue of the temperature, but also your technology is quite fascinating. I'm just wondering, in terms of the enterprise market, like when you've said you've pivoted or pivoting from consumer side to the enterprise side. What are you finding in terms of your conversations with businesses? Are they using wearables? Are they using smartwatches, or is it like a virgin space where they're not using any smartwatches, not even using Apple Watches, and are not considering any wearable technology? Or if they are, what are they thinking about? Because you're pushing a certain technology, but they may not necessarily be that interested in that technology. But they could be interested in other use cases beyond gestures. So I'm just wondering whether you could inform us of your discussions, like what are businesses thinking of in terms of wearables?
Right.
And what are the opportunities?
That's a very good question, Tim. Really appreciate it. So to answer that, there's a lot of businesses out there, just like you said, that that have been relying on wearables in the past, and to a certain extent they still are. Now, as you said, what Gyropom has, since we are passionately creating Gyropom. What Gyropom has is a gesture-based wearable. It is considered an IoT device. It does give a different realm of what brings value to the industry. But what our leads and clients have been telling us is that, and those clients do have connection with higher level companies, Fortune 500 companies, and different areas like that. What we do realize is that as the market is slowly recovering, and inevitably it has to recover. But one of the things that we're starting to realize, what does bring value, is that as you said, there's a lot of different companies that look for value in interaction. So why? So to explain that, I would start with a question: why wearables? All right. So when you're having a wearable, it basically is supposed, the whole point of putting something on your hand or your wrist or on your belt or whatever is to actually introduce a function that normally you can't do with a phone. And because we all have smartphones. We in this society, we have smartphones. We know of technologies that exist already, like touchscreens. And as interesting as those might be, as much as they are useful, sometimes it might not always be as ideal to pull out a smartphone. So for example, if you're working on the field, if you're working on field work, like scientific studies or researchers, I'll give you a list, of different examples. For example, if you're working on the field, like if you're doing scientific studies outside, if you're an essential worker, for example, like right now, if you're doing essential work outside, if you're doing uh, different research and manufacturing, for example, in hermetically sealed environments where cleanliness is key. If you're doing anything that you can't always be holding a smartphone, because for the record, smartphones are actually one of the most bacteria or germ-ridden surfaces that you can ever get your hands on, other than keys, of course, because keys, have bacteria on there. But if you're talking about something that you hold on a daily basis that have more bacteria than anything else, it would be smartphones. And so one of the main things that a wearable would change is when you're not in the convenience to hold a smartphone, or when you're an essential worker and you have to keep your cleanliness and not fumble with your phone, or if you're a medical doctor and you're saving a lot of lives and you need to keep track of things in Epic systems, for example, or if you're a surgeon and you're holding instruments. So I'm seeing that there's some cases like that. Or if you're sitting in a vehicle and you're driving and you don't want to be touching a keyboard. So sometimes you have to have a better means to interact. You need to have a better high resolution method to interact than just looking at a keyboard or a touchscreen. And these are some areas where gesture interaction is key. And I do believe, Tim, you're right that although gesture interaction is not something that everyone is ready to immediately jump upon, what will bring the value and what we've seen that encourages people to bring value. And I'll add one more use case to it. And it's a recent use case that we've gotten to. There are research groups out there who spend, hundreds of millions of dollars to actually investigate how to improve daily living of those who are disabled. For example, those who use prosthetics, those who have lost a limb and can't use their left or right hand. There has to be a better way for them to interact with it. Instead of just using a hook, they should have robotic arms, robotic hands. And sometimes you would want to use the other hand to control the robotic hand, or for those who have a prosthetic knee or something like that. Now, if you have a wearable on the non-prosthetic limb, that might mean a whole world of difference, right? Instead of sticking probes on yourself every single day, you might be doing something else with gestures. Or for those who are driving and they're having both hands on the wheel, so for both normal users and for other users as well, there's a huge potential here, because sometimes you might have your hands tied, you might be cooking, and you might want to be able to flip through different things like a recipe or a tutorial. You might be sitting on the couch and you might always lose the remote. So there's a lot of value here that we can see, that when you have your hands tied, or when you don't always have the ability to do something that involves hand-eye coordination, this is something that doesn't require hand-eye coordination. So with something like Gyropom, you would be able to interact with devices with your eyes closed, and that's pretty amazing of a technology. Especially not only you closing your eyes, but the fact that you don't need to install things around your house just to get that gesture technology to work. All you would have to pretty much do is set up and quickly configure the wearable with your preferred gestures. And the only limit is probably your imagination or the learning curve that it takes to actually program the gesture in there. And again, gestures can be trained once. So you demonstrate the gesture to the wearable once, and from now on remembers how it's supposed to be done. And the next time you could start saying, hey, okay, when I do this gesture, I want this to happen. I would like either this video to be pulled up, or me to be automatically logged into a website, or me to be able to start the car, or me to be able to run through this tutorial or whatever you have in mind. And that is a very, very important thing to do, especially later when we talk about authentication. So wearables can be also used for authentication to prove that you are really you. And that means I don't have to type in long passwords. I don't have to forget passwords now. And, on the field, that's very important, right? I should be able to walk up to a computer and be signed in automatically. And something like Gyropom, and not just limited to Gyropom. I don't want to make this too biased. There's a lot of wearables out there that might have capabilities to be doing that, but they haven't just realized it just yet. They might be able to calculate proximity within other devices and automatically unlock devices, but perhaps that technology hasn't been popularized yet. And so one of our main discussions is, how can you take a head advantage? How can our companies take a head advantage in helping people realize that, and helping different clients realize this technology exists out there, and that, and one of the ways I'm trying to do that is with my expertise gained through Gyropom. So I hope this answers your question, and feel free to ask me anything else you have in mind.
Yeah, no, it definitely, I think those responses are really interesting, as you say. I mean, what are the reasons why you wouldn't want to always have to pull your phone out? And you've definitely pointed out some of the areas. I guess from my thinking about this is, it's also for those people who have to monitor their time a lot, people who, they have to do stuff on a very, very frequent basis, or who are doing things that are time sensitive. I think those are other use cases where, it's just not useful to pull out your phone to let's say if you're a lawyer, to always, click on the smartphone. I mean, sometimes you might want to have a smartwatch to do that. So just there's sort of time-related reasons, I think, that I think Apple hasn't tapped into, but which I think could also be linked up to some of the use cases that you've pointed out.
Right. And now one more thing that it would be good too is, I believe gesture recognition is a good form of communication. So,
Yep.
And I know this hasn't been popularized yet before, but there has been ways where people gesture to other people in various environments. For example, if you're conducting a business meeting and you would like to gesture a certain person to go on the stage and speak, or if you're conducting you're going to a court, or if you're going to a game, or if you're going to anything whatsoever, where you hearing different people in different environments is very tough. This might be a very simple way to communicate with people without actually shouting or without making a huge noise, or if you ever brought family to a shopping mall and they lost each other. And so, having a technology like this, having wearables, it's a very easy way to communicate to people, even in noisy environments. So I've been questioned before, hey, how is this different from voice recognition? Why can't I just talk to Siri? Why can't I ask, the Echo Dot to do all this? And the reason why Gyropom or any other wearable that emphasizes in subtle communication, or have a very intuitive interface would be more valuable than voice recognition, is that I don't have to waste 10 seconds saying, hey, computer, turn on my living room lights. If I know what I want to do, I just do a customized wave, and that would be already ready to do that. And so with a proper reliable gesture recognition mechanism, that would actually consume less time, and actually it would be something that you can get used to quite quickly, instead of pulling up Siri and having it get it wrong. Or sometimes, I don't know how many people actually hold the home button and use Siri, to be really honest. It's not something that a lot of people would be doing, but sometimes you don't always have your phone. Some people want to go for a run, and if you're going for a run, you don't always bring your phone out with you. Or if you're doing errands, you don't always have the Echo Dot next to you, but there's a lot of busy people out there who really value their time, and who really value how they use their time in different tasks. So having this companion to help you out would be something that's very, very impactful. It could be a huge industry itself, or it could be able to bolster a lot of different industries and show possibilities that weren't existent before.
I'm sorry to monopolize. Just have one more question, and I'll let the others join in. Have you considered the use of gesture to load apps on the watch itself? Like you're pointing to using Gyropom to activate things external to the watch, but could you use it as part of the UI and loading other apps? So you could have
yes,
a specific gesture for a specific app.
Yes, that's a very good question. So we Gyropom has what we call Gyropom projects, and it's not exactly like apps because these are more like use cases. So you can actually use Gyropom to load very specific use cases to the watch. We didn't want to call them apps because we want to give a differentiation between pulling up different things, and some of these projects are actually heavily intensified in terms of performance. So what that means is this would perform more efficiently than an app does on an Apple Watch, for example. And yes, you're right. You can use gestures to pull up certain functionality. So for example, we did in our CES demo, we showed how easy it is to switch between controlling a camera to turning on home automation lights to flying a drone, and we did all that within minutes. So yes, it can be used for various applications that are crazy different. All I have to do is do a gesture to be able to swap through all of them. And, and these gestures are single-handed gestures. So you don't even have to push buttons, you don't have to use your other hand. And this gives a user a lot of freedom. In the Apple Watch, if you want to pull up an app, you got to spend a good 10 seconds to pinch through a menu and tap
exactly.
with two hands.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So,
I mean, I heard Tim asking regarding enterprise and how businesses are pivoting. I think I believe I can answer that in a way where I think nowadays there's more interest towards software as a service. So I believe there would be a time when after COVID, the hardware play would be more of a service or a commodity, on top of which the enterprises would start charging people more of a software API calls or something like that. So this Gyropom plan to do that, or do you think that would be a better way? Or are you, are you interacting with companies which are seeing that as a direction to move forward?
I'm not sure what you just meant by that, Vignesh.
So I'm just curious whether is Gyropom just focused on selling the hardware, or is it more like how's the interaction with enterprises like?
So what we do with enterprises is that what we do is actually different with enterprises than what we do with regular consumer-based customers. And what we do with enterprises is that we provide them the standard package, okay, with all the things that are required. So we provide them with a wearable and we provide all these things. But what we do with enterprises that are different than what we provide to normal users is that we provide the extra customization and commercial licensing that they need to actually get this to work with their existing systems. For example, one of the things that we've been trying to do is if you guys have ever heard of something called Industry 4.0, we've seen systems like Bosch Rexroth, and Tulip, where these companies they're actually fairly successful companies right now if you look at it. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to use hardware to achieve their goal of enhancing manufacturing. So I want to point out, like, Bosch Rexroth. They are actually Rexroth was a startup that got bought out by Bosch, so now they're called Bosch Rexroth. So they provide smart hardware, smart modular hardware solutions. That means they provide data collection, they provide sensors, they provide different pieces of hardware for factories. And that might mean, some customers that are of theirs might be buying certain pieces of hardware, but not buying other pieces of hardware. And they have a big variety of different things. But you know what's surprising? One of the things they don't have is wearables. So this is where Gyropom would play a role as a gesture wearable to manage and control such devices. This is the user end output that allows people to really augment their manufacturing environment, that allows them to scale beyond just using a control panel or touch pendant, or doing something that normally requires a lot of mechanical interference Whereas they could be sipping a coffee and just looking at this wearable and just doing some confirmations, things like that. So instead of getting both your hands, onto this, instead of always having to sign in and doing everything behind glass, what we can do is now we can have you in a completely separate room, or the operator in a completely separate room, and be able to interact with these devices without actually touching them, and be able to actually do this in a whole new way, where if you want the device to do something, you don't have to actually go into the system, log in, reprogram everything. Gyropalm will have specific technologies that allow you to get the customization you need to interact with specifically the machines you want. So we do that through our intuitive REST API. We do that in a way which no other company does. The other one I want to mention is Tulip, for example. And these are great questions that you gentlemen have. Not the Tulip flower, but tulip.co. And that is the first IIoT enabled manufacturing system platform. And what they do is they show people how they create software that bonds with their hardware, that uses their dynamic cloud platform blended with sensors to be able to show people how to assemble different things or do manufacturing in a way that's proper. So yeah, as you can see here, and in their on their website, they're showing that, hey, this software is you're able to create software through drag and drop, and you're able to after dragging and dropping, you can deploy it to a tablet, and it could show pictures and different ways of how people can control things. And so that might be all right. Thank you for joining us, Tim. I really appreciate you for coming. So one of the main things that we want to do here is that we want to blend Gyropom with such technologies to have truly endless applications, so that the end user can be empowered that they're doing things right. So if they were supposed to cut something, Gyropom can actually or virtually hold their hand, right? They can actually virtually hold their hand. And what that means is, if you're wearing it, the user would be able to understand, okay, I'm wearing it like this. This is how I'm supposed to be operating this tool. So it's a user validation, basically. It's a very powerful tool for user validation. So these are just some of the things that we can do, and maybe in the future we can go more in depth with how this would actually play out. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. With that said, I'm going to take some final questions, and then I think we should call it a day. I think this has been very productive of a meeting. Do we have any final questions from Luigi, Vignesh, or Ivan?
I don't have a question, although I do want to point out that, so I stated in the beginning of the meeting that one of our protocols in the very beginning of the workday is that it's now a common thing for employees to check on their temperatures. And knowing that if we were to have wearables that would actually track our temperatures consistently, then the protocol is already implemented right there in itself. And instead of just always having to check it only once on a daily basis, instead it's constantly always being checked. And because it's always constantly being checked, it's that provides a lot more security in the fact that there's a lot more faith in with our employees, just simply saying that at any given time there will be, let's say an employee may have a temperature that's over 100 degrees, then it'll send a notification saying that, hey, this could probably be a symptom. You need to be checked out. So what I'm saying is that having a wearable that does track temperature like that would immensely help out with that protocol.
Yeah, that's a very good insight. I think, it's worth considering. It's well, I know that security is a big problem nowadays, and maybe that might be something that would be we can consider, and maybe some other companies can also take into consideration, is that, yeah, it would be something that's very insightful in the long run. I mean, companies should embark on that, and I think it would make a huge impact. Anyways, I think that if we all don't have any other questions, I think we can call it a day. This has been been very productive, and I think we can continue this in our next series about wearables.
I have one final question before we close it.
Mhm.
So, one, do you plan to have any workshops in the upcoming weeks? And if yes, how do you see in general workshops being conducted in the upcoming in the future because of the COVID and the people not being able to meet? So how do you envision the logistics or the conducting of a workshop, especially when it's a hands-on type of a situation?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. I think I will wrap up with this question. This is actually a very good question. One of the primary ways that we normally conducted our workshops in the past were events. Now, with the onset of the COVID, issues, I think we'll be taking a lot of our workshops online now and doing a fully online basis to ensure that everyone has full accessibility to attend these workshops. So we'll be doing more. That means we might be doing more webinars. And as I like to say it, I would share the YouTube live link to anyone who wants to see this, or if they are not able to catch this video on time. But what I would generally recommend is I would create new events that allow more people to interact together, because my goal at the end of the day is to allow anyone who wants to interact with SF Wearables to have a positive voice, to be able to actually share with us your expertise. And so this is basically our club together and our community together that allows us to communicate about anything wearables, anything related to this. So if anyone has any feedback, we would definitely be open for that during our workshops. So we would be conducting some more workshops over time, and it might be on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, and that depends on everyone's availability. But as I see it to it, we will be doing more demonstrations about, or more hands-on about how we can use Gyropom and how we could do more software tutorials as people find more interest in that. So I tried to keep this a little bit more broad for our first meeting, but there can be more optimistic opportunities for other people who wish to attend this. So this is a very good question, and I would say stay tuned. You could find us at www.meetup.com/SF Wearables. So that's one of the ways that you could stay tuned and sign up and RSVP for our future events. So with that said, we will have future webinars and workshops where we can give people interactive advice on how to work with different wearables. Regardless of whether it is Gyropom or not, we can still give a lot of feedback and insights. But what we might specifically do over time is also introduce the capabilities and functionalities of Gyropom in a more in-depth manner. So anyone who's interested in learning about it can have the opportunity to do so. And anyone who would like to pre-order it can also get their hands on a Gyropom package. So yes, that's a very good question. And we look forward to everyone being able to see that, to stay tuned with our upcoming meetings. And feel free to sign up for our weekly newsletter on gyropalm.com. And so that is also another way to stay tuned. So yeah, with that said, it's been a great meeting. I really appreciate everyone who joined. I hope everyone has a great rest of their weekend. And so we hope to see you next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. See you.
Thanks. All right.
Thank
See you.
so much, Donald.
Thank you.